Okay, so I'll be putting up a couple introductions to psychology, and I'm also going to be doing a parallel to that on my Facebook page of also the introduction to physics, or maybe if I can find one for mathematics or one for quantum mechanics. What you're going to actually find is firstly, I start with the psychology notation because it's really important to understand that the nature of this stuff is very mathematical by nature. That gives us algorithms and equation groups to be able to process from more than looking at any one given rock or given person. And what it says in the terms of what psychology is I like the way he did this. This is a scientific process. But one of them breaks down into this hypothesis, process, data, findings. And that's not exactly a great ideal of what this is. I practically use myself, and again, this is in a biased, opinionated state, but it's how you would form any introduction. Like you were saying, one of the hardest classes, one of the hardest things to teach is human psychology, or psychology in general, because it relies on so many different group states, and specifically human nature, because if you look at a giraffe, it's very one giraffe, and it's very scientific in just analyzing its processes and what it does on an average routine over a map where it may never, other than just some very generalized, it migrates to these areas very frequently, but never the same tree. Against sine and cosine, giraffe, and giraffes, the overall means by which they, in their behavior, the mean average in which they objectively observe their environment, or how all of them, whether it's this tree or this tree, how it eats, how it behaves, some of the internal features of the brain chemistry of how that works out, given things like external forces that you may not be understanding. Quantum gravity is the introduction. This is the idea when I say Tesla's quantum machine is the difference between is understanding it in the forms of what this is three steps. The first step you make to introduce something is a concept of a single notation that we're going to do this in quantum fields. Everything along the course of that event is reliant on that first part, and also that first part is the very last part. So it's a matrixing based system. And to be able to handle this material, we know it's a process, that this is how this works. It's what we do and everything we do. But to label it and to cleanly notate it in a Newtonian process can be very difficult. More so than anything, very biased, very opinionated into how you want to do this, but we know that 1 plus 1 always equals 2. And it's just something that I bring into this course that'll help, again, allow a little bit of gravity. The rock, you as a rock, can be based as quantum gravity. You can be the north aspect while talking about these features psychologically. You can you can look at these features and say, I can run all those things, but it's one of those things you have to have other terms. It has to be more than just ugh ugh ugh. And it's what I disagree with mathematics, and it's what I disagree with Freudian and all those other aspects. But here's a great way to describe this. Patton may have won the war, but I don't always agree with those methods psychologically in terms of how this is worked out. With that being said, am I really aware of all the calculations, the models that are voted on in terms of multiple group states? Well, it gets very opinionated and out of control and a big hairy, because chaos theory is still a prevalent system here, as much as knowing any one given part can create as much chaos in the system. So again, it's one of those things that I do here. Yet you still have to make some kind of realistic model of this. You're still going to have to use it because everybody else does. It's what they rely on you to be able to pull that out of, to consider yourself an expert of it. What were other people doing? How are you analyzing that? What are the processes they were doing? The data. How do you form your own hypothesis from this, from any given finding of that position of that data? And what that really relies to, and again, this fourth, fifth dimensional calculation that says that's the hypothesis giving, and then how you're going to Newtonally process that in a new data finding system that will allow somebody else to create other hypotheses of it. That doesn't solve all the answers. It's not going to solve all the aspects of how to raise your kid unless you generalize it. I take over and everybody must use these calculations because they are the only calculations that matter, so why do we use any other variable? And you're going to deal with a whole kind of level of chaos you've never dealt with before by trying to force some parent to raise their kid, feed them exactly this protein solution or whatever, when there are other options that may be relative to their waterfall, their ocean coastline, their mountain around them, that relies very differently to, even if that was the protein source, a cost, a aspect of, well, again, we're all just working for this one company that somebody's ahead of, and it's not government. It's not. It's, you get into a bunch. Again, the terms that I bring up when you actually watch some of those introductions to psychology, I'm doing the exact same thing. This is my introduction to a course of what I want you to understand as me as a general, or the generalizations of my introductions to any one given field. I jump into a bunch, but remember, I'm still using quantum mechanics. I'm still using quantum gravities. I'm still using, those are big terms that I like to bring into this. The S.T.E.M, Rhodes, Fermats, Beals, Riemanns, Nova Strokers. You know, those kinds of the bases are my data aspects that I position in a hypothesis with a given process to help me not have findings, but make them. Which is the study of how the brain works. Again, we don't have those numbers really worked out. In the quantum universe, we really don't know all of that stuff, and a lot of that concept is very psychological. It's why you can use the laws of motion, like a motion one, you know, it's either at rest, they're not doing anything with this, and that's that personality, that's that person, or they're going to change it at a constant speed. You know, they're aware of that calculation now. It's beginning to move, Tesla style, power 3, with that introduction to the end result that now has, like the second law of motion simultaneously acting into this, created an effect. When motion 1 hits motion 2, it's going to simultaneously affect motion 1, and when you get down to that, it's going to be equal in force and opposite in direction. And again, that's vague, but it'll help you understand this if you can take it out of that mathematical speaking or chemistry or physics and go, oh, well, that is psychology, but the terms process to the findings that I'm dealing with change, and therefore my hypothesis isn't a process but a very specific statement in quantum gravity, very stable for how unstable that statement can be simultaneously. I'm not doing anything different. I'm just repeating a process and changing out the terms to create another introduction that I feel would be more practical. Again, it's not just going to hit psychologists, it's going to hit mathematicians. I'm going to tell those mathematicians sometimes you're going to have to use psychology to be prepared at some level of this degree to be able to bring that in there for a given number, people, systems, that you might have to integrate that for or calculate that for. And we'll know calculations are not only general relativity, but also Sun Tzu, weighing a resistance, great matters, and they'll even talk about matter in psychology. What is the brain matter? What is the matter? And you're going to calculate it under those same funds. But I can't predict for you what that is right here. All I can do is, as a general for you, is try to convince you to get that ball rolling, that you need to listen to me. That by understanding a lot more of these things that you may not have studied or practiced, cracked open that book, did the work, which aren't always great systems. Again, when you're studying psychology, and they'll tell you have to open these books, well, you're just learning after a psychologist that maybe didn't have all these numbers worked out specifically for what you're doing with. You have to do the work. Everything you do is work against this system. But if you follow my course, it's going to help narrow this down instead of just saying breathing is this process. Because that's kind of cheating this answer just a little bit. It's the real answer. Just surviving, burning calories, it will help you deal with obesity under that level, but is it going to make that quantum leap in the spark gap of this engine or this engineering of this mechanics that will make you between this A, B, again power of 3, A, B, and all the fractal points in between that are AX, BX, AX, BY functions that will reciprocate back in a positive effect for you. And again, positive is only relative of how you understand that concept. Now, if I understand, oh, I'm looking at the stone dock and all this bullshit around me, I can look at that like that's a positive means to understand how to remove this negative aspect. And you're going to add all that up and do what you need to do with it. So I'm going to be putting some of that up there. Again, you probably get this after that. So I hope some of this works for you. And with that, I'm also going to put some introduction to physics, maybe a couple of them. And I want you to really analyze this. I want you to take some of the information that I do in the other part. What I do with the cards is a great example here. That is far short from, when I say the cards or managerial skills, look, every second is a frame that you could catch somebody's conversation. And I have no clue what you may be talking about. Oh, intrigue. Shock and awe. It's an opportunity to reference that closed off. It was use the general to say Big Bang, a moment of great awareness, an apocalyptic feature to every other calculation that I may reference. So go ahead, when I get done with that, go ahead and use this. Go ahead and do your own YouTubing. Check it out. Go through, find an extra term or something. Again, that you're going to need that stuff. As much as this tears that down, you're going to need it. At some point in time, you may not be aware of that, but that's that middle calculation that when you just go 3, bang, that's the middle point. I'm going to jump right to that one that's going to get to this causally. It's going to make life a lot more simple than just saying A, B. Beginning and end, that's psychology. That's quantum physics and psychology, and we're just going to orientate it to be a Planck spectrum. You know, it's great, it works, and mathematicians might get wet about it, but it doesn't solve all the problems. Certainly doesn't deal with the aspects of what's conscience or what's subconscious, what's particles, and what's subatomic particles. What is aspects along those lines, and play with it. You know, build your own matrix spectrums, build your own laws of motion to how you want somebody to be introduced and understand these fields. That not only that you're forcing this on there, but to help them gauge this difference. You know, that they can speak the same language. You as generals can meet on the field and speak 2 completely different languages. Ugh. Move forward. Catch you on the next one.